Coming up on show 1372, the Ford F-150 Lightning looks like it will drive via your smartphone app. Stick around, I'll tell you more. Also on the show today, we're talking about pricing for the Skoda Enyaq Coupé VRS version, the Ford F-150 Lightning versus its competitors in terms of weight and hauling and payload as well, and the Chinese XPeng coming to maybe 2, possibly 3 European countries this year. Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you're listening in the world. Welcome to EV News Daily. My name is Martin Lee, and it's my job to go through every EV story, so you don't have to. Hey, I'm here to save you time. Thank you very much for supporting the show on Patreon. Check it out. Patreon.com/EV News Daily. We'll start with some Volvo news, and Volvo sales will be 10% of their sales this year in 2022, expecting sales to rise from 6% to 10% of all the cars they sell to be pure electric, doubling the percentage, if you like, of zero-emissions vehicles, writes autoexpress.co.uk. Volvo's roundup of financial results recently revealing they had record revenue last year, and that in the last quarter of the year, 34% of their vehicles had a plug socket on. They describe as chargeable vehicles. But 6% were pure EV. Now, the outgoing CEO, Håkan Samuelsson, saying the firm is on track to be fully electric by 2030, despite 6% being modest, 10% this year still being modest to be all electric by 2030. And you know what, that's going to be an S-curve, though. So much in EV battery world is an S-curve. What might seem like 10% in 2022 probably is very achievable by 2030. I'll pop a link to Auto Express in the show notes if you'd like to read more. Looking forward to seeing where Volvo go with their EVs, because I just love the XC40 recharge styling. Outside and in, looks fantastic. A friend of ours has the combustion version. I'm trying to persuade Mrs. Lee to at least test drive one, but hey, even used ones are like 55 grand. So that won't be appearing in the drive anytime soon. Big Volvo XC90 being replaced with an all-electric version this year. Embla is the name, they say, rumoured that it could be. All right, let's move on. And headline story, FordPass, the mobile app that you get with your Ford, is hinting at a new summon-like feature that could be mimicking things like Hyundai Group cars, also Tesla, of course, very famous for having summon, and smart summon. This seems to be simply moving the Ford F-150 Lightning forwards and backwards, but very useful for a possible driverless parking assistant feature. Now, the electric websites has uncovered some images. Not sure they had done it. They reported on it. The new FordPass app having these images within the app update. They are called, the titles of the image are things like free drive behind and free drive forward. They're stencil drawings of an overhead view of the vehicle, of the truck, and arrows pointing forwards and backwards. Also, associated images show the front view in between 2 Mustang Mach-E's, because obviously you would pick your own brand cars if you're doing a picture on an iPhone or something with a little checkbox on the iPhone they can see. So that would suggest it's some sort of driverless forwards, backwards app function. That's very cool. So a few things, if they're updating the app with that now, knowing that it's possible, hackers, I mean that in the nicest possible way, but nerds, I mean that in the nicest possible way, we're going to find this, that it could get out. Hopefully Ford would acknowledge it and confirm it. That'd be great, rather than just leave us hanging. But that shows if they're updating the app now, on the production timeline, they must be on track. Lightning must be coming at least sooner. And also, Tesla the most famous for this, but not the only one. So Hyundai, either with the Kia EV6, I saw the Asian Petrolhead YouTube channel. It might have been the Genesis GV60. It's on the key on the Hyundai cars, and so moving the car backwards and forwards, very useful. Particularly, they call it Smart Park, particularly for a truck that is perhaps wider in parking spaces. I can think why you'd want to go forwards and backwards without getting in the vehicle if you can't. Also, I'm just trying to think through uses of that. In a truck environment, maybe you are backed up to your trailer and you haven't gone far enough for the hitch. Obviously got a reversing camera. Obviously it's going to have some lines on the screen. You're going to be able to align the tow hitch. But if you haven't, get the app out. You can stand by your trailer, move your car back a little bit, hook up your trailer. That would be a really useful function to have on a truck. So I'll pop a link to The Verge in the show notes if you'd like to read more. Staying with the F-150 Lightning, it hauls more than its competitors like the Chevy Silverado EV. Not that either vehicle are out right now. And what about weight? Well, the Ford F-150 Lightning, with its biggest battery pack, 131 kilowatt hours, actually weighs less than its rival, the Rivian R1Ts, also with its biggest battery. Not quite a fair fight, I'll tell you why in a moment. Curb weight of the F-150 Lightning, 6,590 pounds. I mean, compare it to the Hummer, which is £9,000 vehicle. It's a featherweight, says musclecarsandtrucks.com. But according to Ford's eSource book, they've been scouring the F-150 Gen 14 forums. It's a bit of a lightweight in terms of the Ford F-150, and that's good for payload. The Rivian R1T's biggest battery pack, though, is, here's the caveat, 180 kilowatt hours to the Lightning's 131 kilowatt hours. Still, a low curb weight for a battery electric truck would have a positive impact in things like acceleration, braking and handling. They say, look, all of these vehicles, even the big old chunky boy Hummer, is going to have stupid performance. All EVs have stupid performance if you want them to. And actually, a friend of mine that's driven the R1T, not particularly in anger, but at least on roads, say it actually handles really, really well as well. The base F-150 Lightning's £2,000 payload rating is 54% higher than what the Silverado EV was quoted at. But again, both vehicles aren't here yet, and the Silverado is a long way off yet, so time to make changes to that vehicle. Now let's go to China, or not. Let's go to China and then Europe, because XPeng could well be coming to 2, possibly 3 European countries this year. Let me start off by talking about the flagship SUV, the G9. Now, for my audio listeners, if you can picture a nice Volvo big SUV, like an XC90, maybe an XC60, it's hard to tell from the pictures. That's what this looks like. This looks like a very premium, large, 7-seater, 3-row SUV. This does not look like a cheap Chinese car. And pre-sales begin at the Beijing Auto Show in April. First deliveries begin in August of this vehicle. It's the 4th model of the XPeng lineup, first to be released after the brand refresh, which we saw last year. According to CnEVPost.com, when XPeng announced the G9, it announced some of the specifications: 800 volts architecture and a range of 200 kilometers added in 5 minutes. So it looks like it's ticking boxes already. For me, styling-wise, it's like that's been done by a Volvo designer. So it looks great. And where can you buy one if you're not in China? Well, we know that they already are in Norway, but expanding to 2 new countries, possibly 3. They have confirmed Sweden and the Netherlands in the first quarter of this year. Now, since 2020, they've been in Norway, which is a usual starting point because 80 to 90% of all new vehicles or EVs makes sense. Infrastructure's great. The population, car buyers, are already predisposed to electric vehicles. The local partners for the areas have been confirmed. In Sweden and the Netherlands, they're not going to be opening up their own dealerships or anything. The first XPeng retail experience in the Netherlands will be opened in 2022. The local partners who will do the kind of collaboration with retail and servicing, I think, as well, are called Emil Frey in the Netherlands and Bilia in Sweden. Now, the first retail experience is opened this week in Stockholm, and Bilia, their partner who'll do the retail sales, the servicing, their own network of 58 dealers and 66 service centres in the country, according to InsideEVs.com. Now, the press release also mentioned Denmark, and that makes sense as another country that they could go to, as the 4th country that they would be in. They say progress is being made. They're building its marketing, sales, delivery and service frameworks, hopefully sometime this year. Now, let's talk about a rare car being uncovered totally by accident. This is the GM EV1. And many of the EV1 community and fans thought they knew where all of these were. And a long forgotten but significant piece of history has been unearthed at a car museum in Victoria, Australia. The EV1 has turned up. It was made by General Motors from 96 to 99. It was leased to customers who adored the vehicle, if you don't know the story of that. And then they took them all back and crushed them. But they didn't crush them all. They took the battery packs out of all of them, I believe, and they gutted them but they left many of them intact without the battery, but they donated them to museums and universities for education and study. And the EV1 that we're seeing in question has turned up, according to a chap called Jason Panosh, a member of the EV Facebook group in Australia, talking to the website TheDriven.io. He says that he was in the Museum of Vehicle Evolution, MOVE, in Shepparton, Victoria, and he saw this EV1. And a member of staff said that it had recently been brought in to the museum. It was originally imported to Australia by the now defunct Holden, and when they cleared out in 2021, it ended up in the museum. Don't know if it's a runner, couldn't get any more details on this. I highly doubt it's got a battery pack inside it, and if it hasn't been charged in 20 years, it's going to be in a dubious condition. But apart from the battery pack, it could well be a totally legit running vehicle. It'd be fascinating to know if they can ever get that moving again, and fantastic to see that, well, not all of them were crushed. On the way, very soon on the podcast, we will talk about the Porsche Macan EV. I think it's looking pretty ready. And what's the cheapest EV to buy? Price per mile of EPA range. Stick around and I'll let you know. Now, let's talk about the Audi RS Q e-tron. Audi's naming can be a little bit tricky at times, but this is the RS Q e-tron, is the off-road, four-wheel drive Dakar rally vehicle. Massive tyres, off-roading for sand and ice, etc., etc. And so had some success at Dakar recently with 4-stage wins and 14 podium results. Now, a YouTube video released by Audi shows their latest recruits, famous driver Ken Block, who recently signed on to Audi. They gave him the keys to the RSQ e-tron and let him out onto the snow and the ice to see what it can do. Now that he's joined Audi, he's putting his skills to the test and promoting their vehicles. Right, Hotcars.com. If you want to know more details about this really, really cool off-road vehicle, had a look at the Audi press centre for some more details to refresh my memory. They went with a 52 kilowatt hour battery pack. It's a range extender. It's got an engine inside it, but it's got a 52 kilowatt hour pack, which is enough for the requirements of each leg of the Dakar rally, they say. It weighs 370 kilograms on the battery pack, and the engineers and the technicians programmed algorithms into the vehicle for the Dakar rally to keep the state of charge at its best within the defined ranges, depending on the energy that it needs. So, the energy and the recharging always in balance, they say, over the distance of each rally stage they were doing. So what the engineers did with this is they'd have a look at a stage, maybe a difficult dune passage, they say, with a lot of driving resistance. You need loads of energy for a short time, and then they would drop the battery pack down to a lower state of charge. The range extender would then kick in and charge it up again. The problem is what they call the engine generator unit, the petrol engine, was limited to how much power it could supply. Maximum charging power of 220 kilowatts of charging. So consumption could be higher than energy generation, but only briefly. I'll pop a link to that in the show notes if you'd like to read more. Now let's talk Porsche Macan, and some spy shots have been uncovered, which show it doing some cold weather, snow, ice testing. It's got a bit of camouflage on it to try and make it not look like a Porsche Macan, but it's been spotted again. And I gotta be honest, this looks really production ready. Now, it's due in 2023 as a 2024 model year. The electric Macan is going to be a big seller for Porsche. You thought the Taycan was and it has been a really big success for Porsche, but the Macan will take it to the next level. In fact, I showed my wife the Macan, a petrol one, the other day. We're sitting in traffic. I said, "Do you like that?" She goes, "I love it. What is it?" I said, "It's another one we can't afford." She adored it. And she's not really into cars, but I think the styling, the performance, all going to be massively on point for the Porsche Macan. It's related to the Audi Q6 e-tron, sitting on the PPE platform, so 800 volts, really fast charging, really great performance. The MotorAuthority website say, according to our photographer, a small rear spoiler extended from the tailgate above 30 miles an hour. Yes, if you look at the pictures, they have put some silver tape on for exhaust tips. I love it. I guess 1 in 1,000 people might be fooled and be like, oh, testing a petrol car. But for everyone else, they'd see the massive sticker on the front with a lightning bolt, the electric symbol, and go, oh yes, it's an electric test vehicle. But apart from that disguise at the front, got some tape at the back on the rear windows, and around the C-pillar, some camouflage. The lights are a bit camouflaged. I think it's looking pretty well baked. What do you reckon? I'd love to know if the Macan is a car that excites you. It really excites me, actually, because the Taycan is great for Porsche, but this is where lots of buyers who would have bought the petrol version go into their dealership. What can we buy now? The lease comes up, etc., and they end up going electric. Now, let's talk about electric cars and the best value ones you can buy. The Chevy Bolt EV is the leader of the pack when it comes to price per mile of EPA range. Now, InsideEVs done a great chart. I love this because they've ranked them. They've ranked all the EVs on sale in the US from cheapest to most expensive per mile of EPA range. It's $124 per mile of range, but is putting the Bolt in the list a bit naughty as they're not actually making them. Well, you can buy one, so I guess it should be in the list. You buy a used one, maybe some dealer stock. Do dealers have stock of that, or they had to send them all back? Anyway, with the battery replacements program still not back in production, should be this month in February. So the second highest is the Hyundai Kona Electric, $138 per mile. If you qualify for the full federal tax credit, it takes down to $107 per mile of EPA range. But I didn't realise InsideEVs say Hyundai Kona not widely available nationwide. That's a bit of a bummer, but hey, go somewhere that they are selling it and you'll get yourself a car that does a lot of range for what you're paying. Focusing on the models more widely available or nationwide, InsideEVs say the Model 3 long range. Wow, I wouldn't have that down as a value car, but Model 3 long range does $146 per mile, with no federal tax credit, of course, available with Tesla, so no point trying to do the cheaper price. But the Nissan Leaf E Plus would be a lot cheaper, $107 per mile, including, well, after you take off, if you are qualifying for the full federal tax credits. An interesting thing is the all-new Hyundai Ioniq 5. So if you get it in SE spec, with rear-wheel drive and the big battery, it's not far behind, $148 a mile or $123 a mile with the federal tax credit. And who's at the other end? Well, I think these manufacturers would be quite delighted to be at the top. InsideEVs says the worst result, but it's probably the best result. For Porsche, the Porsche Taycan and the Cross Turismo, Audi E-Tron GT are all at the top. EPA range ratings are exceptionally low compared to real-world tests, and they're very expensive. Well, yeah, they are very expensive. Porsches are meant to be very expensive. They're not meant to win the value chart. So I think, dealers, buyers will be very happy because that's part of the allure, isn't it? It's the allure of the brand of Porsche and Audi. And also, you need to look at EPA versus real world because, when Porsche do the EPA test or submit their numbers for the EPA test, because the EPA don't do testing of all cars, they'll look at the worst possible scenario. They'll do it on the worst possible wheels, but buy one of those cars and they go much further than the official numbers suggest. Well, thank you very much for watching EV News Daily in podcast form on the internet. You can get in touch with me. Hello at evnewsdaily.com. Leave a comment below. Check out the audio version of this podcast on Apple, Spotify, Google. Subscribe for free and get me in your ears. And if you want to support the show, like many, many people do, Patreon, patreon.com/evnewsdaily. $5, $10 a month, maybe more. Lots of people do more than those basic amounts. And you put this show on the air. You support the move to fight the fossils and get the word about EVs far and wide. Thank you so much for watching. And I'll see you tomorrow.